months or so, I promise. Our scripture lesson this morning is from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 14, verses 22 through 33. And this continues right from last Sunday, which was feeding of 10,000 people with loaves and fishes. So we are picking up right where we left off. Let's listen to God's holy word. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead to the other side, while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there all alone. But by this time the boat, battered by the waves, was far from the land, for the wind was against them. And early in the morning he came walking toward them on the sea. But when the disciples saw Jesus walking on the sea, they were terrified, saying, "It's a ghost!" And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." Jesus said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat, started walking on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he noticed the strong wind, he became frightened, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him, saying to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" When they got into the boat, the wind ceased. And those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." May God richly bless our reading, our hearing, and our understanding of God's holy word this morning. Before we get started, I want you to do something for me. You can take out a pen or a pencil, cross out the sermon title, "Walking on Water," and replace it with, if you'd like, with "You of Little Faith," or you can leave it blank. I'm just warning you now, this is what I do sometimes. On Wednesday, I think I'm going this way with a sermon. By Thursday, when the bulletin is printed, I am certain of it. And then on Friday or Saturday, when I wake up, I say, that's not it at all. I'm going this way instead. And that's what happened this week. So the title is different, the sermon is different, and with any luck, it will all make sense at the very end. And if it doesn't, you can let me know afterwards. This is one of those stories that can be heard, interpreted a bunch of different ways, depending on who you are and where you are in life. Some people like to focus on Peter. Peter, who as a disciple is impetuous, a little overzealous, who wants to prove himself to Jesus, or maybe prove himself to himself or to the other disciples that he can do what Jesus can do, that he's a little bit better than everyone else. And yet when the wind and the waves get the best of him, he begins to falter. He starts to sink. Others say that this is about keeping your eyes on Jesus, keeping focused. That if Peter had just kept his eyes on Jesus, the wind and the waves, all the things around him that were distracting him, well, then he would have been fine. And this is a lovely thought. But I have kept my eyes on Jesus before and still felt like I was sinking, going underwater, praying the whole time. And maybe you have too. So while I think this is a very nice interpretation, I don't necessarily buy into all of it. Now, John Ortberg, a pastor and author of the book, "If You Want to Walk on Water, You Have to Get Out of the Boat," offers another view. Does anyone remember that book, the title of that? It was popular about 10, 12 years ago. He says instead of focusing on Peter's failure, we should applaud him for his courage. He was the only one daring enough, brave enough to get out of the boat and to try to walk on water. to follow Jesus. He had the faith to at least try. And Ortberg says that if we want to do the same, to follow God and God's will for our lives, then we have to be brave and daring as well and get out of the boat. And this is a nice twist on this story. And if it helps encourage us to do something that we've never done before, or to try something completely new and different, then I think it serves its purpose. Then just this week I heard another interpretation. And that is, maybe we're not supposed to get out of the boat. Maybe the boat is good. Maybe the boat is going someplace, and we're supposed to stay in it. And that when we're buffeted by wind and waves, we need all hands on deck to help stabilize the boat and get us to where we're going. Jesus didn't ask Peter to get out of the boat. Peter did this all on his own. Maybe he should have stayed in the boat in the first place. My husband Brad said that this analogy is kind of like the interim time. And I said, no, it's not. We're not being buffeted by wind and waves, at least not that I know of. And he said, no, not like that. But you're here, and you want to get over there. There being figuring out what kind of church we want to be, what kind of pastor we want. And if you want to get from here to there, you need everyone in the boat. You need people to row. You need people to provide food, sandwiches for nourishment, energy. You need people to pray. And you need people to entertain the other people, to keep spirits up. And I admit that I've never thought of it that way before, and that is an interesting way to hear this story. But I have another way for us to listen to it. Today I want to focus on what Jesus says to Peter as he catches him, as he saves him from sinking. And we all know those words. We have heard them, we have said them, and we have probably had them spoken to us one time or another. And what are those words? You of little, oh, say it with me, you know it. You of little faith. Okay, how many have heard these words before? Just about everyone? How many have said them to someone else before? And how many have had them said to you? Yeah, it's a pretty familiar phrase. Well, I have a story about when it was said to me. When our youngest son, Andrew, was 10, he decided for his birthday he wanted a baseball party. Which sounds nice enough, right? It even sounds easy. Except this is Andrew, who is and will always be our high-maintenance child. Anyone have an Andrew in their life? You can admit it, it's okay. There are books written about children like him, things like How to Raise the Spirited Child, but we know what they were really saying. This child has always been just a little harder than most, a little more difficult. And his birthdays were the same. I dreaded them. His birthdays in September, I would get anxious in June. That's how hard they were. But he was determined, so we started planning. It was elaborate. It would be all the kids in his class. We'd go to the ball field. And we'd not only play baseball, but we'd play other games as well that he would organize. And there would be food and toys and props that apparently I would organize. As the event got closer and closer, I became more terrified. I just couldn't see how it was going to work. What if too many kids showed up? What if too few kids showed up? What about these games Andrew was organizing? Were they real games, or was he just making stuff up? What if it rained? Where do you go indoors to have a baseball party? When the day of the party arrived, it did rain. A few showers here and there, enough so that the folks at the ball field said, "Sorry, you can't play. You have to go somewhere else." So we relocated to the town hall. The games that Andrew organized were disorganized, but none of the kids seemed to notice or care. There were only 7 kids, but they still found a way to play baseball in the rain. The mud apparently was a bonus. And at the end of the day, while we were wiping down the inside of the house from all the mud that everyone had tracked in, I looked at this high-maintenance child and I said, "Andrew, I'm impressed. I don't know how you pulled it off, but you did." And you know what he said to me? "Yeah, you do." He looked me right in the eyes, and with a big smile he said, "Oh, you of little faith. Why did you doubt?" And my first thought was, "Why, you little..." But my second thought was, he was paying attention. He learned something in Sunday school. But here's the thing. Ever since then, I've heard these words of Jesus differently. I used to think Jesus was scolding Peter. Peter, who was either foolish or brave enough to step out of the boat and try to walk on water. I used to think that Jesus was scolding him for not having enough faith, for not trusting in either Jesus or Peter's own abilities, scolding him for worrying, for doubting. I could hear the words with disappointment in Jesus' voice. "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" But now, I hear these words with kindness, with patience, with understanding, maybe even with a little hint of a smile. Because in our attempts to follow Jesus, to walk with God as we go through life, whether we're walking on water, or in the boat together, or wherever we are, we will worry. We will have doubt. We will make mistakes. We will wonder whether we're doing the right thing, and then we'll worry about it. We will wonder about our family and friends. Are they doing the right thing? We will doubt in our abilities, in others' abilities, and yes, sometimes even in God's abilities. We will pray and worry that we're not praying long enough or well enough. We will take our eyes off Jesus and we will sink, or we will keep our eyes on Jesus and sink. The waves will be too big, the wind will be too much, and we will be scared because we're human. And God knows that, and Jesus knows that. So maybe what Jesus is really saying to Peter and to us is, it's okay. I know you have just a little faith right now, and that's okay. You can doubt. You can worry. Maybe someday you won't, but right now, it's okay. I will be here, and I will catch you if you fall. That's how I hear these words today, and if it helps, I hope you do too. There are all different ways to hear and interpret this story. May God bless each of us in our hearing and in our understanding this day. Amen.